Welcome to the Sacred Flame podcast. I'm Mathias Nordvig, educator in all matters Scandinavian, especially the prehistoric stuff at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And I am joined by Amina Otto. Amina, will you tell us a little bit about who you are as our new co-host here on Sacred Flame?
Yes, hello. My name is Amina Otto. I am a former student of Matthias's at CU Boulder. I then went to University of Cambridge and earned a master's in Anglo-Saxon, Norse, and Celtic. I did a second master's the following year at the University of Glasgow in Celtic Studies, and I stayed on in the same department at University of Glasgow, where I am now starting the second year of my PhD. And my interests align very closely with Matthias's, so a lot of the Old Norse mythology, ritual, a lot of the literary and folklore elements of that. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me as your
Yeah.
co-host.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. Yeah, so for all of our listeners, we're basically embarking on a new concept here where Amina and I will talk about all things pre-Christian, essentially. Both, in a historical sense and also in how is all of this done today in different ways. And well, we're recording on the 1st of October, so that is the beginning of the fall, I would say, especially here in Colorado. I would say today it was the first day that I really felt like the cold winds. How is that like over there in Scotland for
Oh
you?
gosh. Well, over here in Scotland, fall got started very early. It's been quite chilly for the last 2 weeks or so, I'd say. The first day of fall really felt like my birthday, September the 19th. So we've been enjoying a couple weeks of autumn. It's been very gloomy and rainy. So we're deep in the Samhain spirit over here.
Yeah. Also, a happy recent birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm now ancient. I'm a crone.
Aren't we all? Okay, so well, yeah, no, I mean, I don't know what our listeners like how our listeners think about Scotland, but I mean, to me, it's always doomy, gloomy, dreary, and depressing, right? Isn't that kind of what
Yeah,
Scotland
that's
is?
not too far off. I was really expecting that when I moved to England, but Cambridge was disappointingly very sunny and warm. So I
I
really got
Yeah.
that yearning for rain and constant gray skies only when I moved up to Glasgow in 2023. And that's basically how it is. It's quite windy as well.
Hmm.
So all of everything you read about it is very accurate.
Yeah, no, I do remember you mentioning and being disappointed about all the sunshine in Cambridge when you moved there.
I was really upset. I mean, I was escaping 300 days of sunshine in Colorado, and I was so excited for a year in England where it's purportedly gloomy and it gets snowy and it's dark all the time. And that is not what I got in Cambridge. So Scotland is really delivering on that front.
All right, I'm glad to hear that. Okay, well, so since we're talking about rituals and traditions in the fall, is there something that people in Scotland are doing right now? You know, like in New England, we have all the apple cider stuff going down, and here in Colorado, we don't like have. I don't feel like we have any distinct sort of like common uh traditions that people are doing. I mean, of course, like the typical American pumpkin thing is starting. But what's happening in Scotland with all that stuff?
So in Scotland, mostly you see a lot of the pubs switching over to their more seasonal beers. You see a lot more seasonal foods coming out in the restaurants. You get some really exciting seasonal markets. There's quite a big alternative culture, especially here in Glasgow. So we get a lot of night markets, which is really
Mm.
exciting, that are usually held in either old cathedrals or old market spaces that haven't been in use for very long. So those are really interesting. You do see quite a bit of pumpkin spice things even
Mm.
here. A big thing in the UK around this time is foraging. So you
Mm.
actually start to see people coming in with loads of mushrooms, especially, but also some apples and a few like seasonal things that we think of, so gourds and squash and pumpkins.
Hmm.
So there's a big tradition of seasonal food and seasonal clothing here as well.
Cool.
Mhm.
Hey, that brings me to another question. Halloween, is that a thing in Scotland? Because
It's quite a thing in Scotland.
yeah.
In the more industrial places, it's very much like a party time. So you see a
Hmm.
lot of these groups of 20 somethings going around in their costumes. You wonder how they're not freezing their butts off. But there's a massive Samhain festival in Edinburgh up on the big hill,
Hmm.
where they have their Midsummer Festival as well, I think. But they do big fire festivals there, which is very cool. That's kind of the big one. I think there are quite a few sort of Halloweenish traditions in some of the more remote areas. So, especially up in the islands that were kind of populated by Scandinavians, you get a lot of really interesting traditions of like visiting spirits in Shetland and the Orkneys as well, I think.
Hmm. That's pretty cool. Yeah, no,
Hmm.
and also the reason I'm asking specifically about Halloween is that if I'm not mistaken, it was actually invented in Scotland. The
Yeah, a lot of people
modern,
like to think that it was invented in Ireland, but
yeah.
it's difficult to tell because we are dealing with that transition from pre-Christian to Christianized holiday, which can be so hard to pin down. I think it also has roots in winter nights traditions that you see in a lot of Scandinavia. But yeah, I mean, Samhain was the classic like
Hmm.
Celtic fall festival that happened after the harvest was done. It was done to
Right.
kind of bring in the winter and to mark that transition of the seasons, which it's important to keep in mind hits a lot harder the farther north you are. So while
Yes.
it might seem kind of a gradual shift in places like Colorado or most of the US, up here and in Scandinavia, the days get short really quickly.
Yeah. No, there's that. And then, but there's also another thing, and that is there's something about a witchcraft tradition or
Hmm.
some witchcraft event that links directly to Scotland in this, I think it's the 1600s. What is that? What is that thing? I'm Googling it right now, actually. Um,
There might be the North
something.
Berwick witches.
Yeah, I think it's like
Somewhere.
the thing that's really like the origin of why Americans associate Halloween with witches,
Ah, okay.
you
That
see
could
the,
very well originate in Scotland.
yeah.
My knowledge of history basically stops in the early 13th century. Like
That's
nothing
fair.
happens after 1270, 1250-ish. Yeah. I guess late
Al-
13th century.
Also,
But
I mean, I like that you basically called Scotland Scandinavia.
only the very Northern Isles because they were
Yeah.
well, yeah, that's I mean, we're not that much further south than Scandinavia.
No, it's very,
Here,
very
but
much right there. Yeah. So I think the original connection is actually the 1590 North Berwick
yeah.
witch
So it was North
trials.
Berwick witches. Okay, excellent.
Yes. Um and so let's see. I just found the Wikipedia page. It says the North Berwick witch trials were the trials in 1590 of a number of people from East Lothian, Scotland, accused of witchcraft in the St. Andrew's Old Kirk in North Berwick on Halloween night. That's why. That's the connection here.
I didn't know
That
that that trial happened on Halloween. That's really cool. I was actually recently looking at an old woodcutting illustration of the North Berwick witch trials like two
mm,
days ago. And one of my very good friends, who is quite witchy in her aesthetic, recently took a day trip there and took some fantastic, gloomy, moody Scottish witchy pictures. So if you ever get the opportunity to visit, you can see why it's such a witchcrafty spot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, that sounds awesome.
It's
Um,
very cool. Like moody cliffs, crashing waves.
yeah.
It's amazing.
Oh, and there's actually more interesting stuff here. There's a connection to Denmark in all of this too. Um,
Of course.
because
Well, oh, are those the witches who summoned the storm to sink the ship? That was
yeah, and weren't they also like surfing on cats or something like that? I think that was part of it.
probably. You never know. But yes, yes, I remember reading
Yeah.
about this. Okay, it's all
Yeah.
making sense now. Yep.
Right, yeah, it's all coming together. So the Wikipedia page says this about the Danish connection. This was the first major witchcraft persecution in Scotland and began with a sensational case involving the royal houses of Denmark, Norway, and Scotland. King James VI sailed to
Yeah.
Copenhagen to marry Anne of Denmark, sister of Christian
Yes.
IV of Denmark. During their return to Scotland, they experienced terrible storms, that's the storms thing, and had
Yep.
to shelter in Norway for several weeks before continuing. At this point, the interest in witch trials were revived in Denmark because of the ongoing Trier witch trials in Germany, which were described and discussed in Denmark. The admiral of the Danish fleet, Peter Munk, argued with the treasurer Christopher Valkendorf about the state of the ships used to transport Anne of Denmark. The storms were blamed on the wife of an official in Copenhagen whom he had insulted. The Copenhagen witch trials were held in July 1590. One of the first Danish victims was Anna Koldings, who, when tortured, divulged the names of five other women, one of whom was Malin, the wife of the Burgomaster of Helsingør. They all confessed that they had been guilty of sorcery and raising storms that menaced Queen Anne's voyage, and that on Halloween night they had sent devils to climb up the keel of her ship. In September, two women were burnt as witches at Kronborg castle, and James heard news from Denmark regarding this and decided to set up his own tribunal. So that's the connection
There we
here.
go.
Yeah, so
The
the
Scotland is basically Scandinavia. Yeah.
that's one thing, and then the other thing is that like literally like the modern Halloween traditions, the way that we know them, are sort of like a fusion of Scottish Danish stuff going on there. That's pretty wild,
Yeah.
actually.
That's
Um,
really crazy. And they were burned.
yes, they were, yeah. Um,
Okay. Yeah. Usually, well, a lot of witches in the UK are normally they're hanged.
yeah, and
Um,
beheadings was the most
yeah,
common thing
beheadings were
in
also popular.
yeah.
I think drowning was popular in Norway
Could be, or
for
it could
witches.
just be like an
Yeah. I think the
unfortunate side effect of like testing if they're witches, and
Yeah, I think that was they tried to introduce that in England, but the English wouldn't go for it. That
yeah,
was just after the Reformation. They said,
yeah.
no, that's
That's silly, guys. For
yeah,
anybody
that's
who
silly. But
doesn't know
yeah,
what that reference is, that's when you so to test if somebody was a witch, they would tie them up and basically dump them in a lake and see if they
yeah,
floated because the presupposition here was that witches were kind of made of wood or like something
yeah.
like that, so they would float. And
If
yeah, that
anyone has seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, that's what they're referencing when they're trying to figure out if she's a witch, and they say,
yes.
"Can she float?"
Can she float?
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. So now we got all of that sorted out. That there are very close ties between Scottish traditions and Scandinavian traditions. Obviously, we have also influx of Scandinavians in the Viking Age, and they stick
Mhm.
around and maintain some level of Scandinavianness, and especially in the Northern Isles up until at least the 1600s.
Yep.
And then they get, more assimilated into Anglophone culture like everybody
Mhm.
else. And aside from that, Halloween has at least one toe dipped in Denmark before it becomes a thing here in the US and now
Mhm.
also elsewhere, thanks to primarily American marketization of the phenomenon. Yeah. All right. And also, just want to throw that out there. Amina, when you say Samhain, that's what other people might recognize as Samhain, right? That's
Yeah, it's not pronounced Samhain. The thing
no.
about Celtic languages is that nothing is pronounced how it's spelled in the
They're
Roman
worse than the
alphabet.
Danes. They're worse than the Danes.
Well,
Like,
we're consistent. I say we because I work with Celtic languages a lot.
right.
A lot more consistent than Danish. Well, I think,
I
but
think you might be right
well,
about that. Yeah.
maybe there's a lot of lenition. So
hmm
often you get names like the name Nevin, for
hmm
instance. It's the name of this kind of like battle fury spirit that whips people up right before they charge into battle, and that's spelled Nemain, Nevin.
Right.
So the M becomes a V,
Yeah, that makes no sense, but
and
fine.
sometimes a D is a the, and sometimes a the is a h.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it gets, yeah. So Samhain is spelled with an MH in the middle.
Right. But yeah, so but the orthography is intentional, right? Because like with Danish,
Hmm.
we just like we spell things pretty much like Swedes and Norwegians, but then we're just like, let's get creative with this.
Pronounce it however
Like,
you please.
yeah, whatever, man.
I mean, honestly, English is not much better for that.
It can get pretty weird
So
too, yeah.
yeah. But yes, so Samhain it looks like it's spelled Samhain.
hmm
And I hope that you've all learned something now.
Okay, so all right, so let's go to the more sort of like historical
Hmm.
traditions that we know of that were celebrated in that North Atlantic realm, the what we might call pagan traditions. In the saga literature from Iceland from the medieval period, we have like this reference to winter nights and also Dísablot. And the interesting thing about Dísablot is that it's also sometimes used in context of a reference to a ritual that happens in the spring. So there's like
Hmm.
some kind of confusion there. We know also from the Old English material that around this time of year there would be something that they called Motranit, which means Mother's Night.
Hmm.
And so it kind of looks like that at least like uh, around this time of year, there's some major ritual feast happening in the period between somewhere in October and somewhere in November, right?
Yeah.
And just for reference to Dísablot, that you know, the Dísir that are presumably celebrated in that ritual. That's this collective of female deities. They're not entirely sure who or what they are from like the historical perspective, but it seems like this is where that tradition might converge a little bit with this Motranit idea in the English area. So yeah, what can we glean from the material that we have available to us about these traditions?
Yeah, well, as you said in the saga material, there is a lot of mention about the Disir being brought into the Vetternætur celebrations, the winter night celebrations, and it being a time of kind of prophecy and clairvoyance and interaction with a maybe slightly more numinous realm. It was recognized as quite a liminal space, and I think it was definitely a time where you had to be careful about what you did and how you did it. And that is reflected pretty clearly in modern traditions of both Halloween and Yule, even
hmm
as you get deeper into the winter. So I think if I'm remembering my sagas properly, there was an instance of a feast being held, and one of the guests of the feast being a clairvoyant and saying, don't go outside during this night and don't answer the door for anyone. And if anything strange happens, take no notice of it. One of the guests doesn't heed this and he goes to answer a knock at the door that knocked thrice. And he ends up going outside and he sees a group of women dressed in black wielding swords and a group of women dressed in pale clothes riding white horses. And he's killed by the group of women in black.
Mm.
And these are understood to be Disir
hmm
and these mysterious feminine spirits. And I believe that was at the feast of Winter Nights. So
Yeah.
again, it has that element of feasting and spirits coming in and kind of invading um,
Hmm.
these civilized places.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, and this is also where sort of like the stories about Vetunætur converge with Yule, because
Hmm.
we get a lot of similar stories around Yule, and especially in later folk material, right? In
Yes.
Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, this also Iceland, this like story about how the trolls invade the house, for instance.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and there's like my favorite version of that story is the one where some guy has a polar bear, um, and and he scares off the trolls with the polar bear. They're like, "What kind of weird giant cat is this?" This is like a story that was told like in Denmark and Sweden too. Like,
That's amazing.
yeah. So, so that's like a variation of the story. Then we have, these um we also have in Norway in particular these stories about Tunkallen, which
Mm.
means like the farm man or something like that. This you have to leave a space at the table for him, plate and
Hmm.
everything, and also make sure that there's a bed made for him because otherwise like it can get real bad. So
Yeah.
it's like that's and that ties back to these ideas of the other world, right? Like these are much
Hmm.
later folk tales, but obviously Tunkallen is some kind of like spirit, right?
Yeah,
Spirit
they're
of the
rooted
dead
in
or
those
something
older
like that.
traditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The trolls are probably just like essentially like a later more sort of negative version of these
Hmm.
DC or whatever, right? And speaking of the DC here, I think with a description like that, um, and just like the one that we see in the saga, whose title I'm forgetting, where we have Darradahljóð, the spear
Mm.
poem.
Njálusaga, Brennu
That
Njálusaga.
yeah, that
Yeah.
is Njál. Yeah, Njál saga. Right. So what we have there, right, is also like this vision of these Disir, right? These
Mhm.
women riding on the horses, and then this man, and it's kind of a similar thing. There's a taboo associated with it. This doesn't happen
Yeah.
at winter nights. This happens before a battle.
Hmm.
Which battle again? It's one of the
The Battle
Irish
of
ones.
Clontarf in
Yeah,
1014.
Clontarf. Clontarf. Thank you.
Hmm.
And and here we have that taboo again. They go into this dingya, this little like half submerged house, like half submerged in the ground, right? Where they're then weaving with the entrails of men and using their cut off heads as weights
Hmm.
on the um uh, uh, and he's like looking in, like peering in from a little hole in the wall or something like that, seeing what's going on in there. Right. Again, we have that situation. We have a taboo. We have also very clearly like the division male female here. We're
Yes.
dealing with female spirits who have control over people, so somebody's life and death, right?
Hmm.
And then we have this man who becomes privy to parts of it, at least by breaking the taboo.
Hmm.
You're just not supposed to go outside, or you're not supposed to look in and
Yeah,
see what
you're
they're
not
doing
supposed to
over
look
here.
in. You're not,
Yeah,
and you see this
but you
taboo
did it
being broken.
anyway, didn't you?
Yeah, they always do. Men hate being told not to look at women. Look at Actaeon. No, and I think that point you made about this relationship between the Disir and possibly the Valkyriur that you see described in Daradaryod, and this relationship between the life and death that seems to be quite feminine, is also reflected in one of Freya's names, which is Vanadis, which
Mm.
is the Dis of the Vanir. So
Hmm.
she's the Disir, the female spirit of the Vanir, her family, and she also chooses half the slain
Mm,
to take back to Folkvanger with her.
yeah. And
Yeah.
and and speaking of which, we have multiple, traditional names in Scandinavia, primarily in Iceland, but they're also somewhat used elsewhere in Scandinavia, that use that word in the compound, dis, like bergdis or
Yeah.
herdis, and so
Vigdis. Yeah.
vigdis, yeah,
Yeah.
vigdis, which literally means battle goddess, right?
Yeah.
That's badass.
It's super badass. But yeah, so it's a really important element and one that can be understood to be pretty universally recognized, especially at the time that we're talking about.
Hmm.
So it seems like kind of a mysterious concept to us, probably because they didn't really see any need to explain it.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But
Yeah, so okay, so that's part of this like dark time, downtime
mm,
tradition too, right? That we have we can expect that out there around us, spirits will be roaming, and some of them can be very dangerous, right? Like, so we see, the older tradition, the one that's closest to a pre-Christian tradition, talks about specifically about these like female entities who are in charge of life and death.
mhm.
And then we see later versions, these later folklore versions that, turn them into trolls or, even turn them into like some dude. And it's it can also just be like a result of a different tradition in a certain location. It doesn't have to have anything to do with sort of like these broader themes of like
Mhm.
now there's a new religion or something like that. It could also just
Yeah,
be like
it's
this is what
highly
happens in Norway.
localized. Yeah.
Yeah. So what and what we also see, of course, in Iceland, the Huldur or Alvar, who also play that role of invading the house, right?
Hmm.
Um, so it's a very common theme. Basically, overall, I guess the general idea is, oh, these are, unruly, dangerous spirits, right? And so I know that you've been working on the Wild Hunt as something you've been studying and looking more into. How do these things connect?
So I'm so happy you asked that. So the Wild Hunt, one scholar that whose work I really enjoy, Ronald Hutton, kind of broke down origin elements of the Wild Hunt into three kind of categories. And one of those categories was a procession of benign female spirits, so
Mhm,
visiting houses of people that they liked. So again, you have that feminine element of female spirits visiting houses and invading them, but not necessarily scary Disir or invading Alvar or anything like that. These would be benevolent spirits. A second element that he identifies is this procession of the dead, which
mhm,
you see reflected in a lot of modern traditions of Halloween. And the third one being the actual hunt tradition, where there's a retinue. It can either be an army or an actual hunt that's pursuing something that is led by some kind of mythological or legendary figure. In Welsh tradition, it can be Gwyn ap Nudd or Mallt Nos or Aran. In a lot of Scandinavian traditions, it is often Odin. I think Jakob Grimm really loved the idea of Odin leading the wild hunt, the
mhm.
Oscaraya.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, he's
in,
he's got like he's got some curious names too in like local traditions.
yeah.
Yeah. But like, yeah, Grimm sort of was like, "Oh, this is like, for instance, in Danish and Swedish traditions, he's often
Mhm.
called Folmar or something like that."
Mm.
And and Grimm was like, "Yeah, it's basically the same guy as Odin." So,
He's like, he's the same guy. He just has his head under his arm.
yes, of course, right?
And I think, I mean, you have like the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. And
Hmm.
I think you might also have some. So you have Headless Horsemen, and then you have some headless horses as well, I think, in some parts of Germany.
Mm.
and maybe southern Denmark, but I can't remember.
Doesn't it
So
have, yeah, and maimed horses? Like one of the
yeah,
common themes in folk tales is a horse that has three legs and the fourth leg it carries in the mouth for some reason.
I've heard
Um,
of that as well. That's so bizarre.
yeah,
But yeah,
but
so you get these like these traditions of female spirits somehow involved. Sometimes they can be leading a hunt. This procession of dead, or I forgot to mention, often damned people.
hmm
And this idea of a hunt that's usually led by someone and often accompanied by hunting horns and dogs. So
mm,
dogs were a big thing, especially in British traditions.
hmm
So that's kind of, and so you can kind of see little tendrils of this tradition in a lot of the stories that we've talked about now, like visiting spirits, this kind of invasion of the other world into the our normal mundane world. And I think there's also quite a few instances of traditions linking to leaving out a feast or offerings for these visiting spirits that are sometimes associated with the Jólaræja or the Óskaræja, or
hmm
completely vacating certain buildings so that they could be left for the use of them, as you mentioned, and
hmm
later folk traditions that we see. So it's all connected.
Yeah, totally.
But
Uh,
it's yeah,
yeah, a common Danish tradition. It's definitely from the 19th century. It's not old enough to be like
yeah.
pagan or something like that, but it's sort of like a pagan revival thing. It is to
Mm,
put out like a sheaf of grain, right? That's what you
yep.
call it, right? A bundle
Hmm.
essentially
Yep.
of
Sheaf is
yeah.
the perfectly good terminology for
Thank you.
that.
Put that out for like the way that it was told to me is like put it out for Sleipnir, Odin's horse, right?
Yeah.
So you would do that. That's obviously not something that is like carried over since the Viking Age. It's more likely that this is
Right.
something that people started doing in the late 19th century, early 20th century,
Yeah,
where,
and they were really reclaiming those pre-Christian Germanic roots.
yeah, exactly, right? So okay, yeah, so this wild ride, the headless horsemen are
Yeah.
start like that. Of course, makes me think back to some really interesting things in archaeology. Like we know
Hmm.
that it was a common theme among especially the Gaulish Celts to so that would be in what is now France.
Hmm.
When you vanquish an enemy, you chop off his head, and then you ride around with that head for a while
Yes.
on your saddle, essentially, like it's hanging from the
Hmm.
saddle. And this is a in archaeology a fairly well documented tradition, as far as I know, and is we know it primarily from the French area, but it is likely to have also existed, sort of in a broader range of Central Europe. And that's where it starts getting interesting, right? Because going back to our good friend Odin here, right? Like he has this tendency to hang out with a severed head that has been
Yes.
embalmed, right? So, and again, he's also a horse riding deity, right?
Hmm.
That's what he does. If we go back and look at the bracteates from the 400s and 500s, these gold medallions that seem to be some of the first depictions of Odinic mythology, essentially. One of them even has the inscription on it, Yagas is Wodan's Veras, which means Yagas is Odin's man.
Hmm.
Like they weren't trying to hide anything here.
Yeah.
Like these a lot of these depictions, the Odinic imagery on them is this like fascinating. It's a horse. It only has four legs, not eight. And but it's like a horse, and then there's like a bird, kind of looks like a raven, could also be an eagle, I guess. That like seems to be talking to the rider, and then the rider is there, but the rider is just a head.
Yeah.
Like it's not there's rarely a body on that rider. It's just like this
Hmm.
giant floating head on top of the horse. And that's like, okay, guys, there seems to be some commonalities around here.
Yeah, definitely. And I think think the idea of the head being significant as both kind of a source of not maybe not divine necessarily, but special knowledge and a sign of vanquishing enemies is reflected not only in the art and the archaeology, but also in the literature. If you read a lot of the Irish sagas, people are constantly decapitating their enemies, and
Mhm.
there's one instance of a guy riding around with a decapitated head of a vanquished foe on his saddle, and then the head bites him, and he ends up
Mm,
dying of an infection from the bite of the severed head. There's in the Mabinogi, the second branch, I believe, ends with the decapitation of a very significant figure, Bendigeidfran, or the Blessed Bran, and his head being taken to England, and they hold a feast for like 70 years or something, and it's called the
mhm,
Feast of the Head, and they're just
mhm.
hanging out with this mythological figure's decapitated head and getting wisdom from it. So
Sounds legit.
yeah, I mean if Odin can do it, then the Welsh can do it. Why not?
Yes, right.
But this whole kind of head talking tradition is really fascinating. And yes, I think it is best attested in the material context in modern day France.
Mm,
But it does come from that Celtic tradition. But yeah,
yeah.
it's really interesting.
So basically, what seems to have happened here, like in context of this time of year, like it seems like Northern Europeans, we're not going to limit ourselves to like Scandinavians or Germanic speaking populations. It's a broader theme that we're seeing
Yeah.
here. This like a idea that once we get to this downtime, this darker time of the year, this is when we then start thinking about the dead and we start interacting with the dead, right? We communicate with the dead in different ways. This is where the prophecy comes in with
Yeah.
the verlur, as they're called in Scandinavian tradition, the clairvoyance, or
Mhm.
however you want to explain that today. Um, and so this is also where we then like expect spirits to be around more in the dark, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is when Vulva would also travel around and visit feasts in Scandinavian tradition as well. Correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong.
I mean,
I think there's some saga stuff about that.
we
I'm
have,
vague.
yeah, we have the Erika Sakaröida, right?
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that happens in Greenland where
Hmm.
we have a vulva, and it is, yeah, it is in the winter time, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
can't remember if it's the actual Winter Nights festival, but it is during this kind of dark winter
yeah,
time.
I should know this because I assign this reading to my classes all the time.
Yeah, I have the excuse of having my head in Irish literature for the
Yeah.
last 6 months or so.
But no, yes, it's like yeah, she I mean the whole the reason that one that saga and that instance in the saga is so popular and interesting to a lot of people is that this is sort of like a description of a divination ritual, right? Where she
Hmm.
sits on this some kind of like elevated platform called a stutler,
Hmm.
and we have these like women singing this song that supposedly brings her into a trance or something like that. The song is called Vadlucker. And then she sees into the other world and she prophesies that the famine that they're experiencing will end, right?
Mm.
So but this, yeah, it definitely takes place in that time, and this is again where we have the prophecy and
Hmm.
all that stuff, and there's a lot of taboo associated with her as well, and
Yeah.
you have to treat her a certain way, you have to
Hmm.
make sure that she's well fed, and like Toon Cullen, right? You have to make
Hmm.
sure that there's food for her,
Yeah, there's a lot
and
of rules around it.
yeah, and like the clothes that she's wearing is like very like specific, like a hat of rabbit or cat skin or something like that, and gloves made of the same material, that kind of stuff, right? Which is also speaking of witches, very typical, right? Because this is what we
Yeah,
see
there's a lot of
witches.
very specific garb and material associated with that. There's like
Hmm.
witchy accoutrements that you would always expect to see with them. And I think similarly can be said about a vulva
Hmm.
as well. Yeah.
And the material remains that we do have of
Mhm.
people that seem to have had that role of vulva in Scandinavian society. I mean, they also sort of like fall within that category. Like my
Yeah,
favorite
they corroborate
example,
that.
yeah, my favorite example is like the Fyrkat grave from Denmark, Fyrkat 4,
Mhm.
from somewhere in the late 900s, if I remember correctly, like 980s, I think. I mean, she's buried in these like very precious garbs. We can see that they're precious because they've been colored in red and blue, which would be the most
Mhm.
expensive colors you could get. Um, she's wearing toe rings. There's no other body that has been found in Scandinavia with toe rings, as far as I know. And then she has like a little pouch with like this typical witchy stuff that you put
Oh
in a
yeah.
brew, like a mouse's skeleton and owl's vomit, and like I'm not even joking. This is really what's in there, right? Like so that's like that typical Eye of Newt witch that you
Yeah,
get, right?
toe of frog.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, well, that's honestly what informs a lot of these later traditions that we now in our modern minds associate with witchiness or special powers or foresight. And bringing that together with this tradition of this time of year being a time where the dead or the other world beings are kind of walking among us is very in line with that, especially since you get a lot of information from the dead.
Hmm.
You have your headless horseman or just decapitated head giving you information, as Mimir does for Odin, or as Bendigeidfran does for his retinue. You
Hmm.
have, well, the most famous example is Völuspá, where a dead vulva is giving extra information. And all of that kind of circles back into this idea of prophecy and the other world and the dead and this kind of dark, inward, mysterious, numinous, liminal time that we're entering now.
Hmm.
So I don't really know where I was going with that, but it's just kind of tying all of that together.
Hmm.
It's kind of corroborated in a lot of different disciplines that do study this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it all comes together, so to speak, as sort of a, um, to some degree, perhaps some ancestral veneration. Like we know that from, plenty
Hmm.
of European traditions, right? Where, this is also especially in I think it's Greek Orthodox traditions. People will go around this time of year and have a little picnic. At least traditionally they would have done that. Um, have a little picnic with their dead family members at the cemetery, right? So you go and you commune. That's the same thing, right? They're communing with the dead, just like these pre-Christian traditions seems to have been doing as well, communing with the dead in different ways. And then we have all of these like cool, spectacular stories. It's like the dramatized version of all of that. But at the end of the day, it seems like the
Yeah.
main purpose is that uh, this is the time of the year where we now turn inwards and turn
Hmm.
towards our dead. Um,
Hmm.
we we talk to them essentially so that we can uh, become wiser and smarter, essentially.
Yeah, because the dead always know more than we ever can.
Right?
And I
Yeah.
think that's why you get such a strong aesthetic of things like graveyards and skeletons and skulls and dead things around this time as well. It's vestigial in some ways, but it's also such a strong association with this time of year. And it is just that kind of looking inward and looking back moment for us.
Hmm. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, right? Um, yeah, and it's an it's interesting to think of how much of that has actually survived.
Yeah,
Um,
in
yeah.
droves.
Yeah, like and it's not just in a single tradition. It's not just in
Mm-mm.
Scandinavia. It's not just in like Eastern European traditions. Like it's
No,
all
it's
over
all over the
Europe.
place.
Yeah,
Yeah, in Japan, you have the procession of, can't remember if it's 100 demons or 1,000 demons, which is kind of a death procession. You have Dia de los Muertos in Mexican tradition. You have Carnival, which happens at a different time of year. It happens kind of at the end of winter in a lot of Central and South American traditions, which is kind of
but
a combination of like spirits and the dead.
but that's also I just want to attach one comment to that. Like that's the one that survived, right? Like if we think
Yeah.
about it, like people used to have these kinds of festivities at multiple times a year, right? And
Hmm.
Carnivale or Mardi Gras and that kind of stuff. That's the one that got to survive, because the powers that be didn't decide to
Right.
kill it off, right? Because we used to have
Yeah,
a lot more
exactly.
fun.
It persisted, but
Yeah.
there were so many more, and they would have been highly localized and quite individual depending on who you were and where you were and when you were at the time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And yeah, no, it's so okay. Um I guess that brings us to like the next next part of the conversation, that is like now we have like covered all this like, historical material and you know tied it together, or at least attempted to.
Hmm.
What do you personally do around this time of year? Or do you have any thoughts on what people could do if they wanted to, go a little traditional with this kind of stuff?
That's a really good question. Last year, my partner Josh Rude and I put on a Winter Nights festival in Norway where we had people come and I sang a few verses of Völuspá in Icelandic and he narrated them in English and prose. And we did this, it was in a ritual setting. And so we had people bring offerings that they would give to the vulva to get her to speak more and give more of the poem. And then at the end, we hung the offerings around this idol that we called Alda, the year, and we burned the idol with the offerings. And the offerings were things like salt, tobacco, dried flower petals, like very combustible things because they burn
Hmm.
really nicely. And
Hmm.
then we lit it all on fire and hung around the fire while it burned. And then we decorated an altar that had a male and female god pole. So the male was Odin. He had one eye carved out. And we decided that the female was Frigg, but we weren't quite sure because she's not fully done being carved. But it was a really amazing ritual. It was quite small. There were only 15 people, but we got to burn stuff. We got to give offerings to the fire, and we got to put offerings on this altar that we had made with these idols. And then afterwards, we kind of just hung out and had a little feast. And while we weren't really necessarily trying to construct how it would have been celebrated, we were trying to bring together elements that we found in the source material that we thought would make for a good way of kind of acknowledging what this time of year is all about. And we felt like we succeeded fairly well, and we're going to do it again on the 25th of October, I believe, in the same
Nice.
place in Norway. But it
Mm.
was really cool, and it was a good way to kind of lay the year to rest and greet the coming year and this coming like inward time and kind of acknowledge the tradition of prophecy and giving offerings and this not to use too dramatic of terminology, this time of a thinning veil between our world and other ones.
Hmm.
But so that's what I've done, and that's really fun. And it doesn't have to be anything very specific, or it's certainly not reconstructionist, but it's a cool thing to experiment with, bringing what elements you can find in the primary sources into a way that works for kind of modern purposes.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, around here, I mean, we're definitely gonna have a fire ritual too,
Mhm.
at some point. I am for that, like, specifically for the end of October, I will be doing some like secret ritual things out in the woods
Ooh.
in the Pacific Northwest. So
Ah.
yeah, you know what that is, but I'm not going to tell
Yep.
our listeners because that's those are some of the yeah the hush hush things. But yeah, I mean with kids, a lot of it is also, of course, telling the stories.
Yeah, there was a big storytelling element for us as well.
hmm That one is, I think, is really important, right? Because like that is what keeps the tradition alive.
Hmm.
Carving pumpkins. We already got
Hmm.
a bunch of pumpkins. We're of course also going to do the typical American things of like going to a pumpkin
Yeah.
patch and having fun with that, and bringing things home for the altar, bringing pumpkins home for the altar, carve them. Then one tradition that this is it's definitely a Danish tradition. Not, I don't know how common it is actually in the rest of Scandinavia, but one of the things that we do is that we do this both for like this time of year and for like high Yule time, and then also
Mhm.
uh, some do it also for springtime. You basically you take a little lump of clay, and then you put a nice candle in the middle of it, and then you decorate it with leaves and
Mm.
branches and stuff from the woods, right? So in the fall, you have like a nice little fall candle like that. In the winter, you use conifers and
Mhm.
other like Yule associated plants and nuts and stuff like that too. And then in the springtime, you can use new flowers and whatever is like come up, snowdrops and stuff like that as well, to the extent that you can make that whole thing work. Um, so that's like uh, you know a thing that we do as well. So like you have that, and that's like a centerpiece in the kitchen table. So
Yeah.
you light that light in the morning, and you keep that light because it's the dark times. It doesn't get as dark around here in Colorado as I'm used to in the north, but it's okay.
It's fine.
It's
As long as it's
fine.
dark by like 7 p.m., we're not
Right.
complaining.
Yeah.
You've just reminded me that this week, actually, on Friday, my old elementary school and high school in Boulder is celebrating Michaelmas,
Mm.
which is a really fun festival. And that is, while the name Michaelmas is Christian and it's the
Mhm.
feast of Saint Michael, a lot of the rituals around it were really, really fun. We had the Michaelmas games. We do have a procession where the seventh
Mm.
grade dresses up in this long dragon costume and someone rides out on an actual horse wearing actual armor and
Mm.
tames the dragon. And then everyone eats dragon-shaped bread, which is super fun.
Hell
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, it's really cool. It's very symbolic.
Yeah.
Waldorf schools know how to do festivals. And when I was a kid, I never really thought of it. I just thought, oh yeah, it's Michaelmas.
Yeah,
Everyone
yeah.
knows what.
That's the thing we
But
do.
yeah, we would basically shoot arrows into pumpkins from different distances. We'd have a javelin throw. And it's like thinking about it now that we were really tied to yearly festivals. And I think going to a Waldorf school set me up really well for studying this kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds
But
like it.
yeah, and I guess that's not so much like winter nights related, but it is sort of acknowledging the changing of the seasons, and we're going into the darkness of winter, and we're celebrating the harvest that we've just gathered to get us through it. And that was always something I really looked forward to, even though it happened quite close to the beginning of the school year.
Yeah.
But it's a very fun festival, and there's all these songs and special things associated with it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Hmm.
Um, like shooting arrows and throwing javelins. I want to do that.
Yeah, that's like, oh gosh, I don't know why they let us do that. We were like, I think you had to be in at least fourth grade to shoot the arrows,
Mm,
but it was a grand time. I really
yeah,
enjoyed it.
yeah. Yeah, maybe I should introduce similar things in my classes at CU.
I think you should have maybe some axe throwing.
Yes, we should have some axe throwing. Yeah, no, I'm sure we could find some more things to do. Oh, basic, sword fights. You should have sword fights too, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty
I think,
Viking,
well,
right?
they didn't they do a load of games at Yule and Winter Nights
They
anyways? That was
did.
kind of a, you had to do
Yeah,
something to pass the
yeah.
time.
Yeah, but I mean, you've also seen what me and Jacob can come up with at our Threemskapper thing, right? In
Yes.
terms of
I've seen
silly
your
games.
Danish games. I don't think you should introduce those in the classroom, Mathias.
Oh, that might actually get me fired, or at least strongly reprimanded.
I don't know how many lighters you want to sacrifice in the name of education.
No, yes, yeah, no, that not yeah. You're right. That's not a thing.
But
Yeah, but they're good. They're fun social games for, when you're doing pagan drum things in the woods,
yeah,
like we
no,
did
they're
in
perfect
Vermont.
for
So
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So cool. We have actually been chatting for about an hour now, and
Wow, that went
that
really
was
quickly.
right. Did and that was like our allotted time as we decided. Again, this is a new concept to all of you listeners out there. This is a new concept that we're working on. Basically, we're just gonna be talking about interesting pre-Christian pagan stuff on the Sacred Flame. We are aiming for twice a month, actually. And so that will be a big change from what the Sacred Flame has otherwise been up until now. And we will convene again in 2 weeks. And what do you want to talk about then? Should we stay within the theme of like the dark downtime of the year?
I am getting quite cozy in this dark downtime of the year theme.
Yeah.
So I think it could be very fun to stay in that. And let's see, in 2 weeks, we'll be smack in the middle of October, won't we?
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm, yeah, I'm happy to stay in
Yeah.
the what do we do in the dark months when we can't go farming and raiding?
Yeah. No, yeah, let's absolutely continue that theme. We could perhaps talk about maybe get a little deeper into the underworld, visit the goddess Hell, and
Hmm.
see what's up there.
Yeah.
What
Underworlds and otherworlds are
Yeah.
some of my favorite things to talk about.
Absolutely. So we have a tentative theme for the next
Hmm.
podcast episode, underworlds and otherworlds in the dark time of the year.
Hmm.
Thank you everybody for tuning in and listening, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah, thanks everyone.